It now takes 66% of the average monthly income to make payments on the average single-detached Canadian house.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre recently released a 15-minute video on Canada's housing crisis. It went viral, earning both praise and pushback.
As a communications tool, I give it a high grade. I think it's probably an A grade. In terms of the information and its accuracy, we're down more in like the C range.
I'd give it a B-. There is a good sense of the problem, and that argumentation falls apart a little bit when he moves on to the solution part of it.
Like all countries, we've always had problems. Throughout Canada's past, though, almost anyone who got a job could save up and buy a home by their mid-20s. When did all that change? About
Prime Minister
8
Justin Trudeau.
years ago.
House prices became unaffordable by international standards by the early 1990s, and continued rising in relation to median incomes during the first 2 decades of this millennium, well before the current government was in place.
After generations of affordable and stable Canadian home prices, it now takes 66% of the average monthly income to make payments on the average single-detached Canadian house.
Poilievre pulls this stat from an RBC report that looks at the median pre-tax household income needed to cover mortgage payments, property taxes, and utilities.
There might be a model family doing that, but unfortunately, many younger folks aren't getting into average priced homes, so that's not really their experience. And in fact, many of their experiences will be paying a lot for rent and they're building no equity in their home. And by contrast, many older folks will actually have much of their home already paid off, but much more modest mortgages, and they're gaining lots of wealth from rising home values, and that's a point that wasn't captured accurately.
Rents are so high in Toronto that students live in homeless shelters. Others sleep in their cars or even under bridges just to afford to go to university.
Many people, including me, would point at federal decisions made in the early 1990s. And again, a decision made by Brian Mulroney, but then when Jean Chrétien got in, he didn't rescind that decision to get the federal government out of non-market home building. And you see homelessness statistics start to climb in the 1990s.
This shouldn't be a problem in Canada based on our supply-demand dynamics. Think about it. With our massive geography, meaning lots of supply, and our small population, meaning limited demand, housing should be cheap here in Canada.
I think we would want to do a fact check on how realistic it is to show the amount of land we have per person in our country. We do need to recognize that our small population lives disproportionately along very close to the American border, and so we need to be thinking about the population density.
Common sense solution: stop the inflationary deficits so the bank doesn't have to raise the rates. That means cutting government waste and capping government spending with a dollar-for-dollar law that forces politicians to find $1 of savings for each new dollar of spending. By getting back towards a balanced budget.
See that big red spike? That's from government spending during the height of the pandemic.
This federal government took on very, very high levels of debt that I've never witnessed before in my lifetime, kind of akin to like a war-like response to a big emergency to help individuals stay afloat and to help businesses stay afloat. And that's something that many other governments before never had to do.
COVID-related payments actually made a huge difference to housing need. A lot of people were 1, maybe 2 paychecks away from losing their homes. There would have been much, much more homelessness during COVID and after COVID without that kind of an intervention. Everything that Mr. Poilievre is talking about in terms of a problem can only be solved through long-term infrastructure policy, and there's no evidence that decreasing government spending, which is fairly low anyhow when it comes certainly to direct government intervention in housing, is going to help any of the problems identified by Mr. Poilievre.
At the end of the video, Poilievre presents his plan for addressing the housing crisis with strict housing supply targets that cities must meet to get federal funding.
His focus on dialing up supply needs to be nuanced with dialing up the right kinds of supply. How are we going to make sure we're building enough rentals with, 3 bedrooms so that people locked out of home ownership can still raise families? How we could give renters more security of tenure and make sure that, we don't think renters are second-class neighbors.
Our breakdown doesn't cover all of the video's claims or proposals, and we're only scratching the surface of Canada's housing problem. But our experts say better understanding how we got here and all its complexities will get us closer to solving the problem.
This isn't normal, to have entire generations of talented, hardworking young people locked out of secure housing. Something systemic is going on. It's much more complicated than just a problem of a single prime minister or premier. And we all need to expect more of our policy leaders to give us the hard truths about the comprehensive changes that we're going to need to make.